eggs, a typically unremarkable grocery list staple for most Americans, became a point of financial stress and confusion over the course of a single year. Between January 2022 and January 2023, the average price consumers were paying for a carton of eggs shot up by 150%.
Now, how did that happen? And more importantly, why did that happen? New reporting indicates that some of the largest egg producers in the country just use the excuse of avian flu to jack up their prices, even when avian flu had no impact on their operations. So we have yet another example of corporations taking the inflation narrative and running with it, using it for their own advantage in order to maximize profits, and they brag about it to their shareholders. It is such an incredible story. Now, More Perfect Union looked into the profits of egg producers as the avian flu narrative was playing out. Let's watch.
Dominant egg producers not only made up for lower supply and increased costs, they profited off them big time. Just look at Cal-Maine Foods' gross profit margin. Gross profit margin measures how much money a company earned after accounting for production costs. Cal-Maine Foods more than quadrupled its gross profit margin after raising the price of its eggs. If Cal-Maine fairly raised prices to offset inflation and the avian flu, its gross profit margin would stay about the same.
Weird. So how does a company rake in massive profits if they have less supply to sell, right? And more importantly, do the price hikes really bode well with the lack of supply, right? Like, can they actually explain it based on the impact that avian flu had on their business operations? That's a better way of asking the question. Well, it turns out that Cal-Maine's supply actually wasn't impacted by avian flu at all. Don't believe me? Watch.
Since Cal-Maine Foods is the largest egg producer and distributor in the US, we're gonna keep our focus there. Cal-Maine's CEO, Sherman Miller, recently celebrated his company's record sales and net income for the second quarter of fiscal 2023. The company made over $300 million in the second half of 2022, while the price of eggs was skyrocketing. In the company's December earnings report, Cal-Maine's CEO attributed the company's record average selling prices for conventional eggs to a reduced supply related to the outbreak in the US of highly pathogenic avian influenza. In the same breath, CEO Sherman Miller says there have been no positive tests for this bird flu at any of Cal-Maine Foods' owned or contracted production facilities as of December 28, 2022.
So one of the largest egg producers in the country was telling shareholders like, avian flu is really screwing with the supply. We're doing real well though. Look at our profits, am I right? Also, avian flu has had no impact on us whatsoever. Meaning, let's just keep it real, guys. They took the avian flu narrative and they used it as an excuse to jack up prices by a lot. The egg industry, by the way, pretty sure most people don't know this because corporate media doesn't cover it. But here's the update. The egg industry experienced no substantial decline in egg production in the last quarter of 2022 compared to 2021, which shocked me. I couldn't believe it because every story was about like, all these, if a farm finds one hen that tests positive for avian flu, they have to get rid of all the hens, meaning they have to kill all of them. So I bought it. I gotta be honest, I bought it. I'm like, this makes sense. I mean, that's gonna limit supply, except it turns out the hens that remained were actually producing more eggs than they usually do. I think there should be a little bit of an investigation into that because why? How did that happen? Okay. So there was actually no substantial decline in egg production. The number of egg-laying flocks on average only dropped 6% from the year prior, according to the US Department of Agriculture. And as I mentioned earlier, the egg-laying hens that remained were producing eggs like crazy, which closed that 6% gap in the supply. Now, the bird flu outbreak for sure doesn't account for the 150.5% increase in the net average price for a dozen of Cal-Maine's conventional eggs from one year to the next. I just really want to emphasize that. They weren't impacted, their supply wasn't impacted, but they raised prices to the tune of 150% anyway. And what about other inflationary pressures, right? Because businesses are impacted by inflationary pressures as well. I mean, the cost of feed, I'm sure that took some part in the price increase, but to the tune of 150%. Cal-Maine's total farm production and feed costs in 2022 were just 22% higher than they were in 2021. So that still doesn't justify hiking prices to the tune of 150%. And then there's also the problem with the lack of competition in the egg industry. And it looks like major producers were potentially withholding increased production. And there are some farming groups that are calling them out. So Farm Action, a farmer-led advocacy group, claims the real culprit is a collusive scheme among major egg producers to fix and gouge prices, the organization said in a letter to the Federal Trade Commission. Doing so has helped producers extract egregious profits, reaching as high as 40%, according to the letter, which asks the FTC chair, Lina Khan, to investigate for potential profiteering and foul play. I would also encourage Chairman Bernie Sanders, who chairs an important committee in the Senate, to also look into this, potentially have some hearings about it, because I'd love to learn more. I'd love to know how it is that egg producers, that clearly, based on the numbers, did not experience a sharp decline in their production, can justify hiking up prices to the tune of 150%. I think the American people deserve to know, and we should hear their answers.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.